Good morning, Algebra 1. Today we're going to continue moving through Chapter 8. We will be in 8.2. We're going to divide 8.2 into 2 videos, and this is the first of those videos. And you'll have to pardon, it's a little bit darker today because it's a gloomy day here in Pittsburgh, and I also still want to fight against the glare. So sorry for the little bit darker video that we have. You should be following along in your books on page 480. And you should have printed out or at least looked at my note handout to go with 8.2a. Today's lesson is going to be all about multiplying by a monomial. Now, if you remember from last week, we talked about monomials being terms. This is going to be one term multiplying by a monomial or a polynomial. We will be moving forward as we go through this week and we'll see different things come up. But today we are just starting with monomials. The first problem that you see, at least in the note handout and on my board, is a little bit of review from last chapter. This is a problem that you have already been tested on, but I wanted to review some of the basics before we move on to the harder problems. So if I have this multiplication problem, I have 4x being multiplied by 3x cubed. I need to be aware and comfortable with taking that piece by piece. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my numbers together. 4 times 3 gives me 12. And then I'm going to use my power rules with my x's. Remember, my power rules only apply when the base is the same. And in this case, I have an x times an x. So I know when I multiply with exponents, I actually add them. Well, don't forget that this power for this x is actually 1. That's the assumed 1. You don't have to write it, but it is there. So then when I add those exponents, 1 plus 3, I get x to the 4th. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try the practice problem there. You'll see it here on my board and in the note handout. And just, again, for the purpose of reviewing and being comfortable before we move into the harder material. So go ahead and pause the video, try this practice problem, and then we'll go over it. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go over this practice problem. We're gonna do it the same exact way we did our first example. Now this one's a little bit more complicated just because it has more variables in it, but the process is still going to be the same. The first thing that I will do is multiply my numbers. And I see I have a -2 and a +5. So that gives me -10. I'm going to cross that out just for my benefit to make sure that I'm handling every different piece of each of these monomials. The next thing that I see is I have an a, and remember that is a to the 1st power times a to the 3rd power. I add those exponents and get a to the 4th. I look at my b's. I have b squared times b. Again, remember that that is to the 1st power. I multiply exponents by adding the powers. So I get b cubed. I'm going to cross that out. And then I see I just have an m remaining. Well, there's no other m being multiplied, so that is going to remain the same. So my answer to this first problem is -10, a to the 4th, b cubed m. Okay, that was the review part. Let's move on to what happens now when we are going to multiply a monomial by a polynomial. Monomial, one term, being multiplied by a polynomial, more than one, which would be 2, 3, all the way up to however many we want to do. Now in this case, I would call this a trinomial because it has 3 terms. So I'm multiplying a monomial by a trinomial in this problem. Okay, the same rules apply, the same process. However, we're going to use the distributive property here. I'm going to distribute this -x cubed to all 3 terms inside my parentheses. Now, what number do I have out front of this x cubed? You might say, well, I don't have a number, but remember, we do. That is -1 happening there. So I'm going to go ahead and just like our review problem, I'm going to have a monomial times a monomial, but I'm just going to repeat the process 3 times. So my first thing that I'm going to do is multiply the numbers. Negative 1 times 9 gives me negative 9. Then I use my power rules here with my x's, and I get x to the 7th. Okay, I've dealt with that first term inside my parentheses. I'm going to go ahead and complete the process. Negative 1 times negative 2 gives me positive 2 for my numbers. X cubed times x cubed, I add my exponents, and I get x to the 6th. I'm going to cross it out. My last one, negative 1 times 7 gives me negative 7. Notice there's no x power here, or x to any power here. I'm just going to have x cubed. The last thing that I need to do anytime that I'm dealing with polynomials is just make sure that there's nothing else that I can simplify. No common terms that can be combined. Well, in this case, I don't have any common terms. Remember that the definition of a common term is saying variables and powers. And notice that all the powers here for my x's are different, so there is nothing to combine. And I also want to point out to you that we call this standard form. Whenever you're moving on to any math class or any math test, whether it be achievement tests or PSATs or SATs in the future, they are going to expect your answer to be written in standard form. The same is true about Khan Academy. Standard form just means we write everything in descending order. So if I have all of these x's, I'm going to have the highest power first and go in descending order throughout. So your answers on Khan Academy are going to expect you to have them in the right order. So pay attention to that too. Okay, now I want you to pause the video and attempt this practice problem. It is straight from the book, problem 1, the Got It problem. It's also in the note handout, and it's also right here. So pause that video and go ahead and do that multiplication, and we will check back in and go over that. Okay, here we are. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distribute this 5m by all 3 terms inside my parentheses. Doing it the same way I did this first one, I'm going to do my numbers first and then my m's using my power rules. So when I do that, I'm going to get 15m to the 4th as my first term, remembering that that m has a power of 1. And then I will get negative 5m cubed as my second term, and then multiplying the numbers together and leaving that m by itself, I get that. So my final answer here is 15m to the 4th minus 5m cubed plus 40m. That concludes our lesson today. It's short and sweet. You have suggested book problems. They're on RenWeb, and they're also in the note handout. And you have 2 Khan Academy assignments for today. The first one is going to be reviewing monomials being multiplied by monomials. Review from last chapter. You should all be feeling pretty confident with that. The second one will be introducing what we did today. When you are multiplying a monomial by a polynomial, you might see binomials inside this quantity. That means 2 terms. You might see 3 terms. You could even see up to 4 terms. Either way, the same rules apply. You're going to distribute the term or the monomial outside of the quantity to each of the terms inside the quantity. At this point, you might start needing some scrap paper with you as you attack Khan Academy so that you have some area to do your work and then type in your answer. So best of luck, and I will see you for the next video.